as I share with you how I'm using the internet AI to explore the elevation of spiritual intelligence and personal well-being. I keep sharing some of my daily prompts with you to give you an example of how digital dharma can work for all of us. So here's the prompt from today. Please help me formulate the following argument. The brain and the nervous system are the neural correlates of mind. Mind, on the other hand, is a fluctuation of a non-local field of consciousness which has no location in either space or time. A metaphor like a whirlpool could be used. A whirlpool is a localized turbulence in a larger body of water, and it is no different than water, just a different pattern of behavior of the water. So the brain as a physical substrate is the localized appearance and a complex turbulence in a larger non-local field of awareness, but essentially no different in substance from that larger field of awareness. Ultimately, all experience occurs in that field, which is beyond space and time. Can you help me make this argument? Okay, so here's the answer. Here's a possible argument based on the ideas you provided. The brain and the non-local field of consciousness. The brain and nervous system are the neural correlates of the mind. They are the physical substrate that gives rise to our subjective experience and awareness. However, the mind itself is not reducible to just the brain. Rather, the mind is a fluctuation, a localized turbulence in a larger non-local field of consciousness. And then it goes on to my metaphor of the whirlpool. We can think of this non-local field of consciousness like a vast ocean. The brain is analogous to a whirlpool, a localized turbulence or pattern of behavior within that ocean. But the whirlpool is not fundamentally different in substance from the rest of the ocean. It is simply a particular configuration of the water. In the same way, the brain is not separate from or fundamentally different in substance from the larger field of consciousness. It is a localized turbulence, a particular pattern of activity within that field, but the field itself is non-local and not confined to the brain. And then next item, the non-local nature of consciousness. The non-local field of consciousness is beyond space and time. It is the ground of all experience. All of our subjective experiences, thoughts, feelings, perceptions ultimately occur within this field, not within the brain itself. The brain is simply the interface, the localized appearance of this larger field of consciousness. Then it goes on to the implications. This view has profound implications. It suggests that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather the brain filters and modulates a larger field of consciousness. It also suggests that consciousness is not confined to individual brains, but is a fundamental property of the universe itself. Furthermore, it implies that consciousness is not limited to the present moment, but extends beyond the confines of space and time. Our individual minds are like waves on the ocean of consciousness, temporary patterns that arise and subside, but the ocean itself is eternal. In conclusion, while the brain is the neural correlate of the mind itself is a fluctuation in a larger non-local field of consciousness. The field is the ground of all experience and is beyond space and time. The brain is simply the localized appearance of consciousness. And then I said, please explore further the concept of non-local consciousness. And it says, the concept of non-local consciousness suggests that consciousness is not confined to or produced by the brain, but rather exists as a fundamental field that transcends the physical body and the brain. Here are the key points about non-local consciousness. 1. Consciousness is seen as a non-local field or dimension that is not limited by space and time. It exists independently of the physical brain. 2. The brain acts as a receiver or filter of this non-local consciousness field rather than being the source or producer of consciousness itself. 3. Evidence for non local consciousness comes from phenomena like near death experiences, where conscious awareness seems to continue and operate outside the physical body during clinical death. Next, non local consciousness can access information and experiences beyond normal spatio-temporal boundaries such as past lives, future events, remote locations, and collective unconscious realms. This view challenges the conventional materialistic assumption that consciousness emerges from or is generated by the brain's neural activity alone. Instead, consciousness is proposed as a fundamental non-local property of the universe itself, more primordial than matter and space-time. The individual mind is seen as a localized proportion of this vaster unitary field of universal consciousness. Okay, and then I said, what is the evidence for non-local consciousness? The main evidence cited for the concept of non-local consciousness comes from studies on near-death experiences. Here are the key points from the search results. In near-death experiences, people report having conscious experiences and perceptions while clinically dead with no measurable brain activity. This suggests consciousness can operate independently of the physical brain. NDEs report accurate observation of events happening in other locations which should not have been able to perceive from their vantage point near their physical body. This implies a non-local form of consciousness. Some NDErs recount viewing scenes from their life even before birth in transcendent review experiences. This non-local consciousness seems to transcend linear time. The consistent reports across cultures of NDErs meeting deceased relatives or spiritual beings implies the existence of shared non-local dimension of consciousness. Experiments on cardiac arrest patients have verified that NDErs made vertical, which means truthful, observations that were later confirmed while their brains showed no activity. This challenges that that consciousness produces the brain. Phenomena like terminal lucidity, and I'll share with you what that is later, and verified cases of children remembering past lives also suggest consciousness may not be confined to the brain. In essence, the evidence from NDEs and related experiences points to consciousness potentially existing as a non-local field or dimension that is not solely derived from or produced by brain activity. This contrasts with the conventional neuroscientific view of consciousness as an emergent property of complex neural networks. And that's basically today's prompt. You are eternal, immortal, timeless as a being. And space-time and causality is the interface through which we experience our so-called local reality. But local realism is dead. Even quantum physics suggests that. More on this later. Thank you.